Every favor comes with invisible strings attached, threads so fine they cannot be seen but so strong they can strangle empires. In the velvet darkness of private dining rooms, where crystal glasses catch the flicker of candlelight, debts are created that will be collected across decades, sometimes across generations. These are not the debts recorded in ledgers, but the obligations that live in memory, growing stronger with time, becoming more valuable than any currency. They understand something that escapes the notice of ordinary people. Every interaction creates a transaction. Every conversation establishes terms. Every gesture writes clauses in contracts that exist only in the realm of honor and expectation. These invisible agreements govern more of human behavior than all the laws ever written, all the contracts ever signed, all the regulations ever enforced. The amateur thinks power comes from accumulating resources, money, weapons, information, position. But resources can be lost, stolen, depleted, or rendered obsolete. The professional understands that true power comes from accumulating obligations, creating situations where others owe you more than they can ever repay, establishing relationships where their success depends on your goodwill, building networks where their security requires your protection. This accumulation happens slowly, quietly, almost imperceptibly. A problem solved without being asked. A favor granted without expectation of immediate return. A piece of information shared at precisely the right moment. A door opened when all others seem closed. These small acts create enormous leverage because they establish the fundamental relationship. They become the debtor, you become the creditor, but the debt is never called immediately. That would be crude, transparent, amateur. Instead, it sits dormant, accruing interest, gaining weight, becoming more valuable as circumstances change. The person who received the favor may forget its importance, may begin to believe their success came from their own merit, may even convince themselves they owe nothing to anyone. This self-deception makes the debt more powerful, not less. When the time comes to collect, and it always comes, the debtor experiences a shock of recognition. They remember not just the favor but the moment of their vulnerability, not just the help received but the desperation they felt before it arrived. This remembering strips away years of accumulated confidence, reducing them once again to the position of weakness from which they were rescued. The psychology of obligation operates through mechanisms deeper than conscious thought. Human beings are wired to maintain balance in their relationships, to reciprocate benefits received, to avoid the shame of being perceived as ungrateful. These instincts can be overridden by conscious decision, but only at enormous psychological cost. Most people find it easier to comply than to resist. The skilled practitioner of power understands these psychological mechanisms and learns to work with them rather than against them. They never make their assistance feel like charity because charity creates resentment. They never make their help seem like investment because investment implies expectation of measured return. Instead, they present their actions as natural responses to circumstances, inevitable consequences of friendship, automatic expressions of mutual respect. This framing preserves the dignity of the recipient while establishing the reality of obligation. The person helped can maintain their self-respect while acknowledging their debt. They can feel grateful rather than diminished, appreciative rather than ashamed. This emotional comfort makes compliance more likely when the time comes to ask for reciprocation, but the asking itself requires extraordinary skill because the wrong approach can destroy years of careful relationship building. The request must seem reasonable, natural, consistent with the relationship as it has developed. It must appear to serve mutual interests rather than one-sided benefit. It must feel like continuation of existing patterns rather than exploitation of accumulated advantage. Most importantly, the request must never exceed the perceived value of the original favor, at least not obviously. The debt being collected must seem proportional to the debt originally created, even when the actual value has multiplied many times over due to changed circumstances. This perception of fairness maintains the relationship for future use while achieving the immediate objective. The maintenance of these relationships across time requires constant attention because circumstances change, people evolve, and what seemed valuable yesterday may appear worthless today. The powerful person monitors their network of obligations constantly, updating their understanding of each relationship, adjusting their approach as situations develop. Some debts appreciate in value as the debtor's position improves. A favor done for someone when they were struggling becomes vastly more valuable after they achieve success. The person who helped a future leader during their time of need can collect returns far exceeding their original investment. Other debts depreciate as circumstances change. The person whose career has declined may no longer be in position to provide meaningful reciprocation. The individual whose industry has become obsolete may lack relevant capabilities. The professional whose reputation has been damaged may do more harm than good as an ally. The art lies in knowing which relationships to maintain, which to abandon, which to intensify. Limited time and energy must be allocated carefully because every relationship requires maintenance, every obligation needs nurturing, every debt demands attention. The person who tries to maintain too many relationships maintains none of them well. This selectivity extends to the types of favors granted and obligations created. Some services create dependencies that last for years. Others provide one-time benefits that generate limited future leverage. Some assistance solves immediate problems but creates long-term vulnerabilities. Other help addresses root causes and establishes permanent advantages. The most valuable favors are those that change the fundamental trajectory of someone's life. Introductions that lead to career-making opportunities. Information that prevents catastrophic mistakes. Resources that enable impossible dreams. Protection that saves reputations or lives. These interventions create bonds that transcend normal social relationships, establishing quasi-familial loyalties that endure across decades. But such interventions cannot be offered indiscriminately because they require substantial resources and create significant exposure. The person helped acquires intimate knowledge of their benefactor's capabilities, connections, and methods. This knowledge can become dangerous if the relationship sours or if the recipient decides to share information with others. Therefore, the decision about whom to help at this level requires careful evaluation of character, discretion, and long-term potential. The wrong choice can create an enemy with dangerous inside knowledge. The right choice can create an ally whose loyalty transcends normal bounds of self-interest. The evaluation process involves studying people across multiple situations and extended time frames. How do they behave under pressure? How do they treat those who cannot help them? How do they handle confidential information? How do they respond to criticism or failure? How do they manage success or sudden advantage? These observations reveal character more accurately than any formal assessment because they show how people actually behave rather than how they present themselves. The person who is courteous to superiors but dismissive to subordinates reveals their true nature. The individual who gossips about others' secrets will eventually gossip about yours. The professional who takes credit for others' work will eventually claim credit for your assistance. Character assessment requires patience because true nature often emerges only under specific conditions. Some people appear solid until they face real temptation. Others seem reliable until they encounter serious pressure. Still others look trustworthy until they gain significant power. The wise evaluator creates opportunities to observe behavior under various conditions before making critical commitments. The creation of these test situations is itself an art because the testing must appear natural, coincidental, inevitable. The person being evaluated must not realize they are being assessed because conscious awareness of evaluation changes behavior. People perform differently when they know they are being watched, judged, measured against standards they may not understand. Once character has been assessed and found worthy, the process of creating obligation begins. But this process must appear organic, emerging from natural circumstances rather than calculated design. The assistance offered must seem like spontaneous response to discovered need rather than premeditated investment in future leverage. This appearance of spontaneity requires extensive preparation because truly spontaneous help is rarely as valuable as carefully planned intervention. The powerful person studies the target situation thoroughly, understanding their challenges, identifying their needs, recognizing their vulnerabilities. This knowledge enables precisely calibrated assistance that appears effortless while being extraordinarily effective. The timing of intervention is crucial because help offered too early may not be appreciated while assistance provided too late may be inadequate. The optimal moment is when the need is acute but not yet desperate, when the problem is serious but not yet catastrophic, when the person is worried but not yet panicked. This moment, well-calibrated assistance produces maximum psychological impact while requiring minimum resources. The recipient experiences profound relief and gratitude while the provider demonstrates capability without revealing the full extent of their power. This balance creates optimal conditions for obligation formation, but the obligation must be allowed to mature before any collection is attempted. Immediate reciprocation cheapens the relationship, reducing it to simple transaction rather than lasting bond. The debt must age like fine wine, developing complexity and depth, becoming more valuable through patience rather than pressure. During this maturation period, the relationship must be carefully maintained without appearing to be maintained. Casual contact preserves awareness while avoiding the appearance of expectation. Periodic small favors reinforce the pattern without creating pressure for reciprocation. Strategic absence prevents taking the relationship for granted while maintaining its importance. The powerful person becomes a presence in the debtor's life without becoming a burden, an asset without becoming a liability, a friend without becoming a dependent. This delicate balance requires constant adjustment as circumstances evolve and relationships mature. Eventually, the time comes when collection becomes both possible and necessary. The debtor is in position to provide meaningful assistance while the creditor faces challenges requiring their specific capabilities. The convergence of these conditions creates the moment for activating the obligation, but even then, the approach must be indirect. Direct demands destroy the illusion of friendship that makes compliance psychologically comfortable. Instead, the need is mentioned casually, almost accidentally, as if sharing a burden rather than requesting assistance. The debtor is allowed to offer help rather than being asked for it, preserving their sense of agency while achieving the desired outcome. This indirect approach often produces better results than direct requests because it allows the debtor to feel generous rather than compelled, voluntary rather than obligated. The psychological comfort of believing they are choosing to help makes them more likely to provide additional assistance in the future. The successful collection of an obligation does not end the relationship but transforms it. The debt has been paid, but the pattern of mutual assistance has been established. The debtor understands they can turn to their creditor for future help, but they also understand that such help will create new obligations requiring eventual reciprocation. This transformation from obligation-based to reciprocity-based relationship is actually an upgrade because it becomes self-sustaining. Each party helps the other when needed, creating an ongoing cycle of mutual benefit that transcends the original debt. These evolved relationships become permanent assets, sources of ongoing capability that strengthen rather than weaken with use. The network of such relationships becomes a parallel infrastructure that operates alongside official institutions but with greater flexibility, faster response times, and more personalized service. While bureaucracies struggle with procedures and protocols, these networks solve problems through direct personal intervention. While institutions debate policies and regulations, these relationships create immediate solutions through mutual accommodation. This parallel infrastructure becomes increasingly valuable as official systems become more complex, bureaucratic, and unresponsive. When normal channels fail, when official procedures prove inadequate, when institutional solutions come too slowly, the network provides alternatives that can mean the difference between success and failure, but access to this network must be earned through demonstrated reliability, proven discretion, and consistent value creation. It cannot be purchased with money, forced through threats, or gained through deception. It can only be built through patient relationship development, careful obligation management, and faithful reciprocation when called upon. The building process requires decades of consistent behavior because trust at this level develops slowly and can be destroyed instantly. One betrayal of confidence, one failure to reciprocate, one attempt to exploit the relationship for inappropriate purposes can eliminate years of careful development. This fragility makes the network self-protecting because those who would abuse it remove themselves through their own actions. Only those who understand and respect the rules gain lasting access. Only those who contribute more than they take maintain their position. Only those who honor their obligations remain welcome. The rules themselves are never explicitly stated but are learned through observation, experience, and occasional painful correction. Violations are punished not through confrontation but through exclusion, not through argument but through silence, not through revenge but through removal of access to future opportunities. This system of enforcement through withdrawal creates powerful incentives for proper behavior because exclusion is irreversible. There are no appeals processes, no second chances, no opportunities for rehabilitation. The person who loses access to the network loses something that cannot be replaced through any amount of money, influence, or effort. Understanding this irreversibility changes how people behave within the network. They become more careful about their commitments, more thoughtful about their requests, more generous in their reciprocation. They understand that maintaining access requires constant attention to relationship dynamics, ongoing investment in mutual benefit, and eternal vigilance against actions that might damage trust. This heightened awareness creates a culture of excellence within the network because everyone understands the stakes. The assistance provided must be of the highest quality because reputation depends on performance. The discretion maintained must be absolute because confidentiality is essential. The loyalty demonstrated must be unwavering because reliability is paramount. The culture becomes self-reinforcing because it attracts people who appreciate these values and repels those who do not. Over time, the network develops its own character, its own standards, its own expectations that transcend individual relationships and become institutional norms. These norms evolve slowly but inexorably, adapting to changing circumstances while preserving essential principles. What worked in one era may be modified for another, but the fundamental commitment to mutual benefit, reciprocal obligation, and earned trust remains constant. The persistence of these principles across generations creates institutional memory that transcends individual mortality. When original members depart, their successors inherit not just relationships but understanding of how those relationships should be managed. The network becomes larger than any individual member while remaining dependent on each member's contribution. This transcendence of individual limitation represents the highest evolution of power, when it becomes institutionalized, systematic, self-perpetuating. The creator may disappear, but the creation continues. The founder may depart, but the foundation remains. The architect may be forgotten, but the architecture endures. Building such enduring power requires thinking beyond personal benefit to systemic advantage, beyond individual success to collective prosperity, beyond immediate return to generational investment. It demands the patience to plant trees whose shade will benefit others, the wisdom to build institutions that will outlast their builders, the vision to create value that will compound across centuries. This long-term orientation transforms how power is exercised and why it is sought. Instead of asking what can be extracted from situations, the question becomes what can be contributed to them. Instead of optimizing for personal advantage, the focus shifts to systematic improvement. Instead of maximizing individual returns, the emphasis moves to sustainable growth. The transformation represents the difference between using power and being used by it, between wielding influence and being enslaved by it, between creating legacy and leaving only memory. The choice determines not just what is accomplished but what endures, not just what is achieved but what continues, not just what is built but what lasts. In the end, the invisible contracts that bind souls to obedience are most powerful when they bind the wielder as well as the subject, when they create mutual obligation rather than one-sided dominance, when they serve larger purposes than individual ambition. True power creates systems that benefit everyone involved while advancing objectives that transcend any single participant. The mastery of these principles represents the highest achievement available to human ambition, the ability to create value that multiplies across generations, to build relationships that strengthen communities, to exercise influence that makes the world more prosperous, more stable, more capable of serving human flourishing. This is the secret that separates temporary power from lasting influence. It must serve something larger than itself to survive the limitations of its creator. Only when power transcends its origins does it achieve immortality. Only when influence serves universal principles does it gain permanent relevance. Only when the invisible contracts benefit all parties do they create bonds that cannot be broken.